Hi everybody, it's Colin, and this week what I'm going to be showing you is part of my process for getting this image that I took a couple of weekends ago to a place that I wanted to show the bride. Now, as you know, I don't photograph weddings as part of my business, but this was a son of a friend of ours that I agreed to photograph their wedding for them because I've photographed them and their kids over the years. So, when you get that kind of request, of course, it's very difficult to turn down, but because they're friends, it was a lot of fun at the wedding. But I was still the wedding photographer and had to go and do my job for about 12 hours that day. So, and of course, a lot of editing afterwards. But here with this photograph, this one was at the bride's request. So I'm going to set the scene for you. This is a very old building. It was actually built in the 1800s, and the interior was quite dark because it hasn't been refurbished in a long time. So very poor interior lighting. But a lot of brides these days like to have their wedding dress photographed in a doorway or in a window that's backlit. As far as this image is concerned, of course, it's very strongly backlit. And I took several images, some with a fill flash and some without. This was one of the ones that had the fill flash, but there was also a tungsten light right above the dress. So that's where we're getting this little bit of yellowing in the dress from. So, one of the things that I wanted to do was do a little bit of color correction of the white balance on this one. Now, I did shoot in JPEGs, which is the way I shoot weddings, because it does minimize somewhat some of the post-processing for me. But having said that, then I need to get as much correct in the camera as I can. Okay. But the first thing I'm going to do here is give it a little bit of a different color temperature. So I'm going to use the white balance dropper over here on the right hand side and choose an area of the dress that is neutral but tending towards that yellow color. So as I place the dropper onto the dress, you can see it gives me a grid and shows me the point at which the tip of the dropper is located and shows me the color channels of red, green and blue. So I've got 70.9, 70.1, 65.3. So red and green, of course, are the stronger channels. Those of you who know your primary and secondary colors know that red and green make yellow. So those two channels being the strongest are showing me that it's a little bit yellow right where that dropper is. So when I click, it's going to take some of the yellow out of that image. Keep in mind, of course, that I am using a monitor that is calibrated. So, when I am changing the color on here, I am changing it with a calibrated monitor, which makes a big difference for those of you who don't have a color calibrated monitor and you want to do editing and changing the color. You really need to calibrate. Okay. So that has taken some of the yellow out. If I wanted more of the yellow out, of course, I could use the sliders over here. The color temperature, the blue-yellow slider will do that a little bit more, but I'm quite happy with where this one is right now. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to crop this image because it needs a little bit of work and help in that respect. So I'm going to use the crop tool and I'm going to set my aspect ratio to as shot. And that will give me the same aspect ratio as the camera. Okay, and I'm going to take this all the way down at the top to take out the skylights above the doorway. Okay, then I can reposition the dress. But you can't go any more to the right, so I want to bring this up at the bottom. And what I'm trying to do is put the dress as centered as I can, so that's going to require me to maneuver this a little bit more. Okay, while keeping the top and bottom of the dress as far as I can inside of the confines of the crop line. I'm going to take this up just a shade at the bottom. I'm not going to worry about losing a little bit of dress at the bottom, simply because I want to try and even it up a little bit. We're still not quite even, but for our purposes, I think you can see that we're pretty close. Okay, so then the next thing I want to do is my standard processing, which is to get the exposure a little bit better. Now, I did get a little bit of blowout over here on the left hand side of the dress, which I'm not too concerned about, but I can bring some back by bringing the whites down around about there, and I can bring the highlights down too. And that also, of course, gives me a little bit more detail of the colonnades that are outside, which are also blown out, by the way. These are actually pillars out here outside of the window. So we are there. I'm going to lighten the shadows just a shade. That will give me a little bit more detail on the wood paneling. You can see as I increase the shadow detail. And I also want to, at the same time though, increase my blacks, which will give me a little bit better saturation of this image. Okay. I also increase the clarity a little bit, simply because that gives a little bit of a boost to the mid-tone colors. In other words, those mid-tones, it increases the edge saturation, so it actually helps define the colors a little bit better and increases the edge contrast between colors in the mid-tone ranges. And I want a little bit of a boost of the vibrance as well. So even though my intent is at some point to turn this into a black and white image, I also want to give the bride the option of seeing this in color. So that's the work that I'm doing right now, is to give her the color option, and at one point later on I will convert this into a black and white image as well. So I'm still looking at this and thinking that it needs some work, simply because the left and right hand upper portions of this image are still a little bit too bright for me. So one of the things I am going to do is I'm going to use the gradient tool, graduated filter here, and from the corners I'm going to increase, using that graduated filter, I'm going to actually decrease the exposure to darken those some. So I'm going to do that on both sides. And all this is doing is I place my cursor where I want to start the graduated filter from, and this just drag into that portion of the screen where I want the filtration to stop. So what it does is it gradually changes the exposure from left to right in this instance. That's the way I was dragging. And I will darken that down too. And I can always adjust this if I want to by dragging and maneuvering using the little hand holder. Okay. So I'm quite happy where that is at the moment. I am going to increase the whites a little bit though. I know I toned them down some, but I've darkened that bodice of the dress and I want to increase those a little bit more. So here we go. We're just about at a point now where I want to do a conversion. There's one more thing I do want to do though. You can see up here there are little silver brackets on this doorway, and I'm going to use my spot removal tool to get rid of those. First though, I am going to increase the size of this image so that I can see that in much more detail. Okay. So all I did was click on the 1-to-1 ratio, which boosts the size of my image that I'm looking at in my workspace, and then I can maneuver that portion using this tool on the left, my preview area. I can just drag this preview around wherever I want it to go, so I can get a better view of what I'm looking at. Okay. So back to the spot removal tool. And see, that spot is just about big enough where I want it to go, and all I'm doing to increase the size is I'm turning the dial, the button on my mouse. I can use that to increase and decrease the radius of the filter, and then I just click and let it do its work, and then click done. And of course I have another one the other side, and right there do the same thing. And just point on the target and click. Okay, it does its thing. Click done. at which point I can zoom out again. Just click to the 1-to-1 and it takes me back. I'm sorry, I said click to 1-to-1, should be click fill. Okay, so just click fill and it takes me back, and there you can see that those two silver brackets have been removed from the image. So this is about where I would like the image to be to show the bride as far as a color image is concerned, but I also want to give the option of showing her this in black and white. In fact, I want to sepia tone it because I think it would be more fitting for this particular image given the age of the building. It just seems to fit to do some sepia toning and make the image look a little bit more aged. But to do that here in Lightroom, keep in mind that Lightroom is a place where I can make changes to images without actually changing the image itself, my original. So this is non-destructive editing. And I want to keep this particular image in color. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a virtual copy of this image so I can carry on working on it without changing this color image. I will now have two images to work with. Okay, so I right click in the middle of the picture and I can move down until I see where it says create virtual copy and click. So here's my virtual copy. This is exactly the same image that I ended up with, and you can see now down in the left hand corner it tells me I have two different images. I have one of two, which is my original per se, that's the one I was originally working on, and then I have the 2 of 2, or the copy. Okay, and this is the one I'm going to carry on working in. So what do I want to do with this? Well, first of all, the thing I want to do is I want to find my sepia tone, white toned. There we go. I think this is where we need it to be. There we go. So just click on the little arrows here to the left of these captions and you'll come down, you see I have a sepia tone, and as I scroll through these or move my cursor through these options, you see the navigator pane actually turns color and changes to show me the effect. Now I could use one of the antique settings, but I particularly like the sepia tone. It's a little bit more subtle, I think, and when it does the conversion, I'm just happy with that conversion, to be honest. But one of the things I do like to do with these images, I add a vignette to them. Okay, so I'm going to go down here to vignette number 2 and add that as well, and you see how it darkens the corners and edges of the image. So this then is all I'm going to do with this image. It was brought to a point in the color image, which is my 1 of 2, that I was happy with to show her. At some point I might lighten the bodice just a little bit, but you know, I'll have a look at that. I'll come back to that at a later time. But then I have the second image, the virtual copy that I made of the now sepia toned and vignetted. I could also add a vignette to the color one, of course. Just click back over there to show you the color image and add the vignette to that too. So it adds a lot more drama to the image to add the vignette in both scenarios. But these were the two images basically that I showed to the bride, and she was incredibly happy with both sets. So from here, of course, I would have to export both of these images to show her the final production. Okay, so not completely there. There's a little bit more editing that I would do, like I said, bringing out some more of the shadow detail in the bodice, but that's about it. Those are the major strokes, which, if I'm not talking and showing you, takes a lot less than 14 minutes. It probably takes about 2 or 3, to be honest. So a very quick rendition to show you how I treated this particular image to be able to show the bride. Okay, that's it for now. I'll catch you next time.